Good afternoon, everyone. So we are here again on the second day of our international webinar on apocalypse narratives, literature, and
Anuradha madam, please go ahead. Anshuman sir disconnected.
Uh, okay. That's a very sad thing to happen because Angshuman was supposed to actually go ahead with, conducting the program today. So I have to take up since he's been disconnected due to poor network, I guess. So, good afternoon, everyone. Once again, welcome back to the second day of our international webinar. And we have all the speakers with us today. Arlene is here with us today too. And we were having a few technical issues and network connectivity issues, which was why we are running behind schedule for the day. We are sorry for that. But let's begin right away. The first speaker for us today is Dr. Madhuja Mukherjee. And let me just present a brief hello everyone. And yes, so let me just read a short bio note of Dr. Mukherjee before she starts the presentation. Her paper is titled Contagious Narrative, Popular Cinema and the Popular Perceptions of Pandemic. Dr. Mukherjee is Professor of Film Studies at Jadavpur University, Kolkata, India. She is involved with art practice, curation, and filmmaking. Mukherjee is the author of New Theatres Limited, The Emblem of Art, The Picture of Success. NFAI, Pune 2009 is the year of publication. Editor of Oral Films, Oral
narrative.
Cultures, Essays on Cinema
What
from
happened?
the Early Sound Era.
What happened?
Okay,
Error?
Angshuman, you got completely disconnected. So, Dr. Salam asked me to at least, go on with the introduction, but please carry on. I would like you to conduct it today. So please carry on since you are here. Can you hear me, Angshuman?
I'm live probably. Sorry for the technical glitches because of this new system. As I was talking about this new normal that we have to accept gradually, and we are gradually learning to accept it actually. So a very warm welcome to all of you. It's the second day of our international webinar on apocalypse narratives, literature, and popular culture. Yesterday we had two wonderful lectures. The keynote address was given by Professor Erlin, whose canvas was overwhelmingly expansive, and she started by identifying the etymological resonance of the term and then explored to the fullest the 20th century theoretical backdrop against which the concept of apocalypse is often played out, referring to Blanchot, Lyotard, and Levinas, among others, in the process, as well as imagined apocalypse and the real experience of Holocaust encoded in literary as well as popular cultural texts. And in Professor Pinaki's brilliant lecture, on the other hand, tapped on a very subjective interpretation of the apocalyptic with reference to comics in general, bringing out the process, the way the space-time dynamics becomes integral to the concept of apocalypse, represented often metaphorically in the landscapes drawn in Jebes, The Walking Dead, and others. Even today, we have two distinguished speakers among us. The first speaker is Professor Madhuja Mukherjee. She is going to deliver her lecture on contagious narrative, popular cinema, and the popular perception of pandemic. Professor Madhuja Mukherjee is a professor of film studies at Jadavpur University, Kolkata. art practice, curation, and filmmaking. Mukherjee is the author of New Theatres Limited, the emblem of art, the picture of success, editor of oral films, oral cultures, essays on cinema from the early sound era, voices of the talking stars, the women of Indian cinema and beyond. And she's the co-editor of Popular Cinema in Bengal, Genre Stars Public Cultures. Her forthcoming volume is the Industrial Networks and Cinemas of India. Mukherjee's research areas are sound cultures and technological transformations, film studios, industrial history, genre stardom, women, labor, and new media conditions. She is the writer of Ekti Tarar Khoje, Kissa, and her Carnival is written and directed, was premiered at National Film Festival, Rotterdam. And the second film, Deep Six, is in post-production stage. So, Professor Mukherjee, I hand it over to you. Thank you for being with us, and please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anshuman. Thank you very much, Anuradha. And I'm very, very happy to be here alongside Shudev. And also thanks a lot, Dr. Salam, for agreeing to help me out with the PowerPoint presentation. I hope I'm audible and it is the system is working fine for everybody. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, contagious narratives, popular cinema, and popular perceptions of the pandemic. But I will be focusing on certain specific films and try and look at what do popular narratives do to the ways in which other medias work, function, or they speak to each other. So, can we go to the next slide? Yes, thank you. So, as discussed yesterday, by the keynote speaker, that there is indeed a very long list of films which deal with the apocalyptic stories, narratives, and so on, and quite a few specifically on disease, on pandemic, on especially infectious diseases, and so on. The film that I want to talk about, Contagion, it was actually this Warner Brothers film was rarely watched, and it was placed at 270th rank it had as far as viewership is concerned, which has suddenly in the last 3 months sort of gone up, and at the present it is placed at the second position. So there is the pandemic, and there is what is interesting. So let us say that there is the pandemic out there, and there is a large viewership of pandemic films, pandemic literature, or even pandemic webinars, let's say. So that on one hand. On the other, we have, what is interesting is this sort of a dialogue between different medias that I will be talking about. The print, the television, and especially the social media, but the social media. So, Dr. Salam, the next slide, please. Is it possible to have the next slide? Yeah. Yes. So I could have, I particularly, if you want to catch up with the pandemic films, I would particularly suggest these two films, Train to Busan and the Tamil film, which was came last year, and which is really, really interesting, and it is what is interesting, and that is what I want to point out, that there is a particular ways in which these pandemic narratives are put together. They are stored, as it were. So but there is also a particular way in which media is telling us as to how the coronavirus pandemic is unfolding, and this sort of mirroring of films that came, maybe 10 years before or 5 years before or last year, and how we are receiving the stories, the, let's say, the news report of the current pandemic is uncannily similar, and they seem to mirror each other. And I'm trying to understand is as to how these two narratives come together so or fit with each other so easily. So, Dr. Salam, before we go move ahead with the discussion, can we have the first clip, which is of Virus, this film Virus? I don't think we have the sound. Is it possible to have the audio? Uh, yeah. Can we go back to the, yeah? Sorry about that, but these things happen. Just to explain, this film actually tells about the problem, the brings up the problem of treatment, and it also deals with fear, the ways in which it is spreading, and the kind of the social isolation of people when at the time you get the disease. So we move over to the next slide, please. Can we have the next slide? Yeah. So Contagion and by Steven Soderbergh, the two 2011 film, and the ways in which what I'm trying to say, or what I've been trying to look at, is the ways in which this film becomes a sort of a meta narrative in the ways in which we are understanding the current pandemic. So the next slide. As you would see, when I had seen the film more recently, I was struck by the thing that that the one of the sort of these scenes where the bodies are put in the grave, and the graveyard is created, like a sort of mass graves are put in that place. I had actually imagined that it looked exactly the ways in which people in the New York City were buried. However, what we figured out, and it was later proven, that various websites, including Twitter, was sharing images from the film Contagion as images of real images, as images of things, as to how, images of what was happening in the stores, images of food crisis, but as well as of the grave. So the next slide, please. So I'm trying to think of, yesterday, Professor Arlen had mentioned, as to how the public space has transformed into a media space, a social media space. So if you have to look at that, if you're trying to understand as to how, through these narratives, the cinematic narratives or literary narratives, or especially as to how there is a sort of a interconnectivity between different disparate medias, then we will see that actually there's a mashup which is happening between, and we really don't know. We have to, even the news channels, you would see that they're constantly saying that this has not been verified. We have not verified the validity of this video, so on and so forth. So there is a lot of information, but we will rarely know which is true, where the source of the image. But that is not the point. The point is as to how narratives of current pandemic are connected to cinematic narratives. So the next slide, please. Yes. So in the context of this webinar, and by referring to both intermedial, so disparate media, as well as intertextual practices, what I want to look at is as to how certain popular narratives, what is the function of that, how it circulates, and how it enables us to think about broader, larger historical narratives, as it were. So I'm not actually doing a textual analysis of Contagion. What I'm trying to do is try and read Contagion as a kind of a structure, like a lens that allows us to see the current situation more critically. So I would say, also yesterday it was mentioned that, let us say, these films or these narratives about there are a number of films, actually, let's say Godzilla, where you repeatedly see that a particular country, and specifically the New York City, is constantly under threat from the outside. So when we eventually, and I happened to be on television on that day, so many years back, when the 9/11, the really unfortunate 9/11 incident happened, and it was quite clear that the camera angles that both the public as well as the television channels were choosing were very close to the kind of camera angles, or the edit pattern, or the application of, let's say, dramatic music along with the news, where they were drawing from certain styles, certain aesthetics of classical Hollywood cinema. So the next slide, please. So before we move ahead, what is this film about? So actually is, of course, it is a 2011 film, and it is drawing from the SARS fear that had happened, and the infection and the sort of spread of the disease had happened. So, but what is interesting is that the film mentions the virus. It has a name for the virus in the film, which is called the novel virus, as in a new virus. And the structure of the narrative is quite close to how we are experiencing the current situation, and that is what is really uncanny. So it begins. Actually, there's a map as to how the virus spreads in the film, which says that it started, in Hong Kong, then it went to Macau, then this woman who was traveling across PRC, she sort of picked up the virus and she brought it home. So there is a human character. So that is, let's say, that is like a popular discourse point one. And then there is a scene where one of the doctors, played by Kate Winslet, she explains on the board as to how this disease spreads through multiplication, and the ways in which she explains is quite similar to the ways in which many of the doctors explain the current situation to us on television. So that next slide, please. So this film, it throws up, certain terms and expressions, and it repeatedly comes. It says that the first is, of course, this novel virus, which is spreading, which is through multiplication, it is spreading. And it in fact opens on a black screen with somebody coughing. And how many times, especially those of us who are in India, have heard, you take the phone, and how many times have you heard this sort of a, disturbing cough that destroys your chain of thoughts, as it were. So the film begins like that. Then there are they talk about clusters where the diseases happen, and as to how people have to be quarantined, and the people who have been affected have to be taken into isolation, and most important, that we have to find a vaccine. So that is how the plot unfolds. May we go to the next slide, please, Dr. Salim? So, but there is an interesting poetic line which I felt also speaks to this moment, where this little girl says, to her friend over the phone, that we have lost the spring, we will lose the summer, and another 144 days, because that's the time for the vaccine. So yes, we indeed did lose the spring and the summer this time. So the next slide, please. So there is a particular way in which the film maps out this spread. There is a visual map. That is the uses of close-up touch. You can see this hand holding, this close-up that you can see on the right of your screen. So it spreads through touch. Opening on a black screen. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So opening on a black screen, as you hear the sound of coughing, you become aware that you know what it is. Thereafter, the film begins to problematize touch, and it is not touch only as to how the spread, it is spreading, because it is about there are many things. There is the one of the lead characters, this woman who brings the virus from Hong Kong and Macau to Minnesota, USA. She was also actually having a affair with her. She had rekindled her affair with her ex-boyfriend, and so there is another story about intimacy, about touch, about whom do you touch, about whom you don't. She comes home and she hugs her son, and eventually the son dies, but her strained relationship with her husband saves him, as it were. So there's a question of the disease spreading through the touch, but there are other sort of larger points that come up, which is the question of intimate touch, the question of, let's say, the social gestures like a shake of hands, or pat on the back and things like that. So that is that, and you see repeatedly see close-ups. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so it involves women in significant roles, as globetrotters and what is known as, what we have learned as the super spreaders. So we have Beth Emhoff, who dies at the beginning of the film, and she gives it to this woman who had come to the Macau from London, who had given her back her cell phone, and that's how she got it. So let's go to the next slide, please. Yes, this woman I was talking about. So there was this exchange of cell phones, and this woman who is British, she also gets, and they, so from Macau they take it to UK and to the USA. Next slide, please. So Beth is she is both the mother and the adulterous wife, and another time we can talk as to what it means that her son gets killed. But we move over to the next slide. Yes. So the virus spreads really super fast across the globe, and it is multiplying every day. It's not addition, it's multiplying every day. And the primary concern of the film, however, is that, of course, it mentions that it is all across the Arab countries, it is in the African countries and Asian countries and so on. I'll come to the problematic representation of Asia, especially a place like as developed as Japan, or even China for that matter. But it is of course a Hollywood film, and it is like a, in a way, a popular one. So its concern is, it has two concerns, really, among two main concerns, let's say. It is that this virus really reaches USA super fast, and the other is it reaches through a woman, who is successful, who is fun loving. She was in casino in Macau. She is irresponsible in a way, and because how she behaves, perhaps, and an unfaithful wife. So let us go to the next slide. So there is a way in which this build-up happens. It is through the uses of close-ups, and you see the fragments of the body. That's how the cinematic narrative is built, and the dramatization is the drama is produced, as it were. It is the body, is its relationship with the public, the personal relationships, and also certain prohibited relationships that I spoke about, and what we really also see in the opening of the film is, after Beth dies, we also see her autopsy. So there is a particular way in which her body is repeatedly attacked. Her skull is sort of the skin of the skull is taken off, so on and so forth. It's shown. So there's a particular way in which the woman's body touch, prohibited, personal touch, publicly what is allowed, what she does in casino, that she shakes hands with people, that she sort of, hugs a person. There are many things that are quite important. Can we go to the next slide? So, Contagion, this film, has been described as a film which has puzzle narrative, in the sense that there are multiple plot lines, and they are interlinked, in this case, through the disease. So we have this, the story of the doctor who tries to save people. They are taken in a kind of a sports auditorium kind of a place, and eventually she dies. And the next slide, please. Yes, and the story of also the WHO head and researcher, who is trying to find the vaccine, and because she does not have time, So she is testing it on one person, that is her father, after the tests have been done on other mammals, her monkeys. And but what the film shows, if you go to the next slide, what you see in this slide, but we can go to the next slide, is that she has been kidnapped by people in Hong Kong, and they want a share of the vaccine. So it is it's a particular way in which this film sort of frames, and that this disease comes from Asia, and Asia is underdeveloped, a place like China or Japan even. So they are not the people who are going to find the vaccine. It will be found in US. So they have to kidnap the WHO, so who researcher, because they need vaccine. So let's go to the next slide. Yes. So after Beth dies and also her son dies, that part of the story. So within this puzzle narrative and stories of 3 or 4 people which are interconnected, we see her husband with his daughter, which is from his first marriage. So, and there are these sort of as the disease spreads, there is this entire sort of the food crisis, the fear and the trauma. There is a particular scene, the still of which you see on the right of of your screen, is that they go to get groceries in the shop, and they're scared by the that they will get the disease. So they are wearing gloves, they take it off, they come back, then they start stealing food from houses where people which have been vacated, so on and so forth. So that like the meta sort of narrative that I'm talking about, the character played by Matt Damon is like a meta human. So he will not get the disease, but he has to save his daughter. But he also has to save his daughter from the kiss of her boyfriend. So the next slide. So a large part of the film's plot deals with as to the race for the medicine, the vaccine, the cure, and how the government is involved, and so on, the mismanagement and so on. But then the question comes up as to whose vaccine, and who are the people who are going to get first. Next slide, please. So there are others. So in a way, it is quite attempting to be correct as far as its politics is concerned. So you have the doctor, it sort of ticks the gender and the race boxes. So you have the person of color who gives away his own vaccine to a little kid of a person who works in his home. So there is a particular way this comes up, how do we try to prioritize, and so on and so forth. And the who researcher actually also gives away her own vaccine to the people in the Hong Kong village, to the kids in the Hong Kong village. So what is prioritized is, of course, children across the globe. Let's move forward. Next slide. Yes. Uh, so that is more or less how one would read the plot. However, there is another character which is very interesting, played by Jude Law, which is about this person is a blogger, and he is claiming that he has been cured by homeopathy. And I began to sort of I began to think that when these stories are our own experiences were coming forth, that all this sort of things were coming together like a jigsaw puzzle, is not by chance, because there is as though a meta narrative, and there are certain films which has already told us how it will end, as it were. So this blogger is this the film is also talking about social media and quite critical about it. And this person is seen as a cheat who claims that the disease can be cured by homeopathy. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is what the ending of the film is. So the ending of the film is day one, and it really is quick. If you are not careful, you miss the shots. So it illustrates really shot by shot how the disease had spread. Next slide. Thank you. So it spreads. So there is this one little bat who eats a banana, and then one small piece falls in an animal farm where they raise pigs. So the next slide. Yeah. So that poor little pig, it turns up at a really posh restaurant in Macau, and it is the disease is transmitted to the chef, who shakes hands with Beth. So the next slide. And finally, to this American, traveler, who brings it to home to her child and to her lover. So she's the one who comes back to Minnesota via Chicago, because that's where her lover is, and she spreads the disease first in Chicago, then to Minnesota. So next slide. As I was trying to explain, that there is a particular way in which the suffering body, and let us say the surviving body. So there are two types of bodies. There's the suffering body and the surviving body, the physical body that we are, carrying, as it were. So, but of people of different ethnicities, and there, if we can build an entire sort of see a body discourse that is there in the film about what you touch, whom you touch, who is, what is and this the Mitch's attempt, played by Matt Damon, Mitch's attempt to constantly protect his daughter physically from the touch of the boyfriend, is very interesting, that he is protecting his daughter, teenage daughter, and his wife has been, having going back to her ex. And so it is interesting as to how certain ethnicities, how certain these ethnic identities are created, where, let's say, where they are, where do they fall sick, let's say the East European person who has immigrated to the US, or let's say the person in Hong Kong train, or the person in the Tokyo bus. There's a particular way of Asia being overpopulated, and as to how it will spread so quickly, and so and the kind of threat, therefore, US is in. Let us move to the next slide. Okay, just a moment before we go to the next section of the presentation. Can we have the clip number 2? If the sound is not playing, then we will not play it. But let us just try. So can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. This is a reading of the film. You can Google and find it out. So it is a reading of the film, and the voiceover is in Hindi, which explains exactly what happened, in Contagion, and how it is connected to our own lives at the moment. So since the sound is now, because it's a little funny in the ways in which it is explained in Hindi, you take this snapshots, you take the stills from the film, and you sort of explain it in a sort of a linear way for the Hindi speaking audience. You can Google and watch it. Maybe we will just skip because it's a little long. It's about 12-13 minutes. So let us go out of this. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint, please. Yes. So we are talking about, the current situation. No, the previous. Let's go to the previous one. Yes. Yeah. So I was talking about the sort of the ways in which this, that's why it is contagious narratives. The ways in which this film has become a meta narrative, and how it has been picked up. Let's say this Hindi voice that is explaining the film for a online channel, or let's say these memes that are circulating. So I'll be talking a bit about the memes, because these are quite interesting examples of as to how the public space is how especially the social media public, this sort of intertwining between the public space and the social media space are connected, and memes become a very interesting example to understand how these interconnections, the intermediality that I'm talking about, and the intertextuality that also I want to have been discussing. So let's go to the next slide. So what I'm trying to say, I'm trying to argue that the news and the reports, many of them that we have seen in the last few months, have been driven by narratives. A couple of, I'm talking about Contagion, but there are a couple of other films. There are 7 or 8 films, especially the World War Z is another film, which is, where instead of this sort of invisible virus, you see zombies that are attacked, and once the character played by Brad Pitt, injects himself with the vaccine, the zombies cannot do anything to him. So but there are other things that come up, which actually the Hindi narration, if you go back and Google and watch this Hindi narration of the about this film, you will see it is saying that this point has come out that the virus, the COVID-19 virus, have been genetically engineered, and it is a biological warfare. Of course, China wants to defeat the US and so on, but there are other kind of social and cultural fears about what Asians eat, especially meat. And this, I've been talking about body touch and this question of meat, and how dangerous it is, and therefore how the East in general, broadly speaking, is a threat to the global West. So let us go to the next point. Thank you. So popular cinema has not only presented, therefore, apocalyptic stories, it is repeatedly shown as to how certain specific countries are under threat. So in fact, I had seen also this meme that by watching these American films, I was under the impression that the attack would only happen, if people arrive from Mars, they wouldn't be coming to Kolkata, they would certainly go to New York, so on. So that's the kind of memes and the jokes and the parodies and the sort of the caricatures circulate. But so there's a particular way in which, I'm trying to say that there is, let's say, a condition, there's a disease, there's a problem, or people, the aliens from Mars attack or Godzilla attacks, but there is somebody who has been attacked, under attack, and there is somebody who is instrumental in that attack. And that is repeatedly, historically we have seen how this other has constantly changed, from the Cold War period to the contemporary period. So let's go to the next slide. So what next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So what I'm trying to say is not really, my intention is not to discuss the film and how it is close to our reality. I'm saying actually that our realities are different, they are varied, but the film has offered a narrative form. The film tells us how to make meaning of the current condition. So, to put it simply, the classical Hollywood narratives are sort of, the plot is uh, stitched together by there is a cause. In this case, it is China, or what the 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 different kinds of the tribes and the communities within PRC they eat. So there's a cause, what Chinese eat, let's say, and there's an effect. What is the effect? In this case, a very scary and infectious disease. So this kind of a sort of a cinematic narrative demands a closure. We have to have like it's very cinematic. It's like 2 hours, it's like 3 hours, so on. So there's a time frame for that. It is 15 August at this point, and this it means that that there is a particular way in which we want to see the story, that okay, 3 months is enough for pandemics to sort of completely destroy as life as you knew it. But 15th August is a good day for the story to come to an end, so what is written at the towards the bottom of the slide is that there is, this kind of narratives demand a resolution, a closure, and in this case it's a vaccine. And it's not only Contagion, it is also the World War Z film. So there are many films that we have to resolve. There is a pandemic, but somebody or the other will be, if it is a American film, then the Americans will be able to resolve it. If it's an Indian film, then the Indians will, and I'm sure if it's a Chinese film, then let's say a film in Mandarin, then they will find a solution in their own language. Next slide, please. So the previous one that we were talking about, that the cause is China, as we are aware, has been repeated by President Trump, saying that it is a Chinese virus. So there is a political rhetoric is borrowing from cinematic narratives, what I am trying to say. The next slide, please. So on April 21st, some clever photographer and reporter had taken this photo, and they zoomed in and they found that Trump had these notes where the word Corona was there, and he had struck it off and he had put Chinese. You can see the right of the frame. But what is interesting, is that you can actually see the time. So it is at 11:34 and 33 a.m. when he's delivering this lecture, and we see that he has used a particular kind of he's borrowing a particular kind of a rhetoric, a popular one. Yeah, he has to find that language, a popular language, and he has used the word Chinese virus at least 20 times more than 20 times during the month of March. So second slide, the next one, please. Yeah, thank you. So, in fact, the U.S. Secretary of State had, at the beginning of May, he had said that there is enormous evidence that the virus was artificially created in the Wuhan's lab. Only thing is that towards the end of the month, around 23rd, 24th, then the scientists and the researchers said that it is absolutely impossible for biologists or virologists to make a mutated virus, to invent a virus, as it were. But over a month, during the month of May, we were discussing, whether this or that. Next slide, please. Even the Indian TV channels, they were claiming that we should join, we should boycott China. Eventually, so these television channels, they constructed and echoed. So they were it's like a meme, you are echoing something that you already know from you are using an image that is already there, that exists, or let's say a phrase that already exists, but you are also reconstructing it. So you are both echoing and constructing or reconstructing at the same time. So these television channels were doing the same. They were both echoing and they were constructing the apprehensions and the uncertainty around China, which I have, I mean, the economists would be far better and equipped to explain that, but it's my hunch that it is because of China's ever rising economy. So but it is, what is important is like the film World War Z, is that you need something tangible. You need to see the virus. You need an image of the virus. You need a zombie, or you need a sort of a round thing with spikes all around. You need a symbol of that virus to fight with. So the televisions, the news, and the political leaders were constantly, or are constantly building that. Next slide, please. So even the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So even the popular Bengali daily Anandabajar Potrika, it sort of on beginning of May and towards the end of May, initially they said that it was created, and then they said it was not created. So these stories are around. Let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So, if we are to understand the social media space as the new public space, let's say the coffee house, as it were, if the public space is transformed into social media spaces, then memes become, memes are like what the Bengali says, the adda. So memes are the one of the most potent socio-cultural practice, which draws from multiple media, multiple sources, and then reinvents it. So I particularly like the mutated form of these memes and how they circulate through let's say the various social media sites, or through the phone, WhatsApp, and whatnot. Next slide, please. So memes inform us about social relations and the ideological dynamics. So there is this sort of a, through intertextual referencing, and they are borrowing fragments, like the fragments of images in Contagion, the hand, the face, the mouth, and all that. They're taking fragments of media, and then followed by these mixing, or the mashups as they are called, and they present a certain kind of a contemporary debates, of course. But what is interesting, that it is working through mimicry, it is working through parody, it is working through imitation, and they tell us about a very, very complex social tussle, ideological tussle that is going on. But it is what you see, this sort of a sarcastic meme that you see on the left of the frame. It is also memes, and does not necessarily mean that it is radical. Popular culture is not necessarily radical, or not necessarily revolution, is, or necessarily it is sort of a counter revolutionary. But what I mean is that they tell us about a condition. It's a process. It is constantly transforming. What is interesting about popular culture is that it is constantly changing. By the time we are able to understand what memes are, memes will be a passing. So it is like that. It is also presenting certain residual traits by recreating the, maybe in this case, the dominant ideology. The next slide, please. Yes. So, involving intermediality or multiple, in this case, they're borrowing from a film clip in both cases. And then there are these intertextual relations, the phrase, the words, the sentence could be from another film, and so on. There's mimicry, parody, and also a self-reflectiveness, like the one on Bangla, and all the memes that you may have seen about the people in Kolkata constantly going to the market, to the bazaar, to get fish, and they prefer fish to and they are ready to risk their lives, as it were, for the fish. So it is it can also be, as we see in the saw in the previous case, that it could be also racist, sexist, communal, and irresponsible. But they are like, as I said, they can be both a voice and an echo. But they tell us something as to how there is a grand narrative and there are multiple sort of variations of that. Next slide, please. So, yeah, this is another example of mm, that the virus was created by in the US. So you know who are creating what. So let's go to the next slide. So as I was saying, so there is a it's very interesting, and even when I received the invitation for the this webinar, this date 15th August was not fixed, but that that now this in the last few days we know that we're going to supposed to have a vaccine on 15th August. That really fits into what I'm trying to suggest, that the race for the vaccine. In fact, I was watching a few documentaries on the situation. There are already documentaries on the Netflix and various other online portals. So that the race for vaccine across the globe, there are many countries, and there are also this story about that Bill Gates is funding such vaccine, creation of vaccine. So there are many countries and there are many pharmaceuticals who are into this race. So the only thing that is comparable is what is being suggested is a race to the moon. And we know that the race to the moon in the 1960s was a completely kind of a political, kind of a requirement, that whether in the sort of in the, if you read it in the light of the Cold War, then the that USSR sends a human, into the space, and or even a dog, and for the moon landing to happen immediately was really a political need. It's a similar situation. It is a similar situation. We have to understand, our everyday in probably in the light of these grand narratives. So the next slide, please. So, while mainstream media reports and memes present disparate views, I'm coming close to the end of the discussion, or rather the presentation. So, on May 10th, the New York Times published an article titled "How Pandemics End." And it's not a question; it's a statement. How pandemics end. So it's a very bleak picture, and it said that pandemics end when we die, of course, and or we learn to live with pandemics, like we've learned to live with so many diseases. So, but both Contagion and the article How Pandemics End tell us that there have been few cases where there has been a medical sort of an end, a medical resolution that we are looking for, which is for the smallpox. Next slide, please. In conclusion, I would like to say that when we are talking about meta-narratives, we are not necessarily borrowing these narratives as a way in understanding our lives in its entirety. Like what we have chosen to overlook, let's say, is what I had said at the beginning of the presentation, that it's a puzzle narrative, that it is the story of women, that there are the two main characters, a doctor uh, and the researcher are women, and they risk their lives in many ways. One person dies, one person is kidnapped, and she puts her father at risk, and so on and so forth. But we have not discussed enough as to how women leaders have controlled this situation. Is this gender question pertinent? I'm asking. On the other, what we have selectively chosen is the story that even a country like Japan, let's say, which is seen broadly as Asia, of course, that countries, even developed countries like Japan and of course China, PRC, and I've been, you know, at this point it seems fortunate because our travels have been so much stopped, is that I've gone to these places, and probably Japan is the most developed country in the world. So in a situation like that, what we have selectively chosen is not actually, let's say, that who are the people who are bringing the change. We have selectively chosen what is the cause, and that we need to attack that. So the next and the last slide. Yeah, the next slide, please. Yes. So in brief, what I've been trying to say, a close reading of the of this film enables us to reflect on contemporary media forms and the social media practices. Thank you very much. I'm done. I'm done.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Am
I can hear you.
for such an okay.
No,
Thank you so much for such an
I mean, your voice is breaking.
I think that is because of the net.
Yeah, yeah. Or you can type the question.
There might be
I can
network. There
answer
might
it.
be,
You can type the question on
am
the
I
or the comment on the chat. Then I can at least address your question,
am I
because
audible? Is it better? Is it better now?
yeah, it is.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much, ma'am, for such an
আরে দাঁড়া না, একে নিয়ে যা না রে।
will that be okay if I take them?
Yeah, come on. I have been hearing that you have enjoyed my presentation, but the rest I couldn't hear.
Okay. I was just
Madam,
asking, can I
you
take
can go through the YouTube chat box there on your right side.
That's what I'm saying, that you could write it on the chat box.
You can go
Then
through the YouTube chat box
I
as well.
could yeah, everybody will be able to see it.
Yeah. There are some questions also you can go through.
Where I can't see any questions.
Yes. Is this better? Am I?
Yes, you are audible in the beginning. Yes.
Okay. So there's a question from Gunjan Vedi. The question goes like this: can the speaker enumerate the particular psychological phenomenon behind the sudden spurt of renewed interest in apocalyptic films and pandemic-related series and documentaries?
Okay, so that's what I have been trying to say, that I'm not, of course, a psychologist, but what I've been trying to say is that these films offer a resolution. These films, despite the fear that they create, that they tell us that at the end things will be fine. And nobody is telling us that things won't be fine, excepting that that New York Times article. I mean, of course, there would be some which would be presenting very scary narratives, but by and large, what these films do, that we know that Matt Damon will be able to find a vaccine. We know that Brad Pitt, in this, if you watch this film, World War Z, the film, that Brad Pitt is not a doctor, he's nobody. He is in a room and he's surrounded by zombies, and he is looking at various sort of medicines and syringes and bottles, and like he goes 1 2 3, and he just does guesswork, and by chance he's able to find the vaccine and vaccinate himself. So these films also bring in a promise. That's what I'm saying, that these narratives are engaging because what they're doing is that they're telling us that there is a resolution at the end of the story. that there will be a vaccine. But what I also wanted to point out, that even the news, even the sort of the political rhetoric is borrowing that narrative.
Right. We have another question, which is from Shuparna Sengupta. And the question goes something like this: is our cultural concept of apocalypse informed by the West?
To an extent, I think it requires a very long. Oh, good. The I can see the question. I mean, I think it's a very broad question, and I am not totally an expert on that subject, but it's. I have been thinking, why there are such few films which are, Indian films which are about apocalypse, as compared to let's say Hollywood, especially Hollywood. But there are many reasons for that. It is to an I mean, this apocalypse. I mean, whether we have been informed by the West is yes and no, because maybe you have never watched Hollywood movies, then you have escaped it, as it were. But it is not so simple. The point is that there are historical, political reasons as to why certain cultures would have these apocalyptic narratives. Like, there is a great deal of study of, let's say, German films, especially during 30s and 40s, and the, let's say, or even earlier, especially 30s, let's say the German expressionist films, or the Dracula films that came up in many of the European countries, as to how certain fears take shape, of zombies, of Dracula, or something that is tangible, something that you can fight and defeat, and so on. So these are of course historically and politically loaded things. But also, I would from the film studies point of view, I would also like to point out that film is like a product. There are millions of dollars, or crores of rupees spent in that product. So there are certain sort of so there are certain broad strokes that films will have to borrow to play safe, as it were. So Hollywood, even if you want to make a grand apocalyptic film, Indian filmmakers may not have the expertise, or I mean the team, the broader team, and things to pull it through. So there is a particular way in which Hollywood operates. What I'm saying, that there are briefly two things: a, that there are various historical and political reasons for that; b is that we have to also understand the history of Hollywood, and see, to answer your question, whether we are influenced by that. I do not really know, but these narratives are really, really popular, and they are built in certain contexts, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. If we may take a flower who goes to ask, how can
Again,
this pandemic cinema
I,
be
I,
taken
I,
more?
your voice is breaking again.
Okay. How this is another question.
Yes,
Am I audible now? Is it
yes,
Yes,
better?
yes.
yes.
Okay. This is another question from Sanjana Plawat. How can the ominous pandemic cinema be taken more seriously to avoid future apocalypse?
I mean, don't take cinema seriously at all. It's a text. It is like I mean, it is a text. It's a perception of a few people, and it will not help us in any way deal with pandemic of the future, or of the present. These are texts we should have. We need to develop critical faculties to read them more critically, not look at it as an influence or something that will help us. It is not like a um, chicken soup for the soul. It is not that is not the purpose. We have to read everything, cinematic text particularly, when so many things are there. For one scene, let's say you need 50 actors, you need 3 cameras, you need light, you need sets, you need color as blood. So there are many things. It is a construction. So we need to be able to see, as when we study literature, we are able to read, we are trained to read language, narrative structure. Same for cinema. We need to be critical. We need not necessarily, cinema is not like a social work that it has a responsibility to change the world. That's what I would say if you were in my class.
Okay. And there is another question from Orunima Sen. Do you think that the vocabulary of these movies
Just a moment.
influenced the contemporary?
Just a moment. Is this a group from a certain college? Hello?
Which group are you referring to, Madhuja?
No,
if you could
because the Ria Banerjee is reading out different questions of different people. So I'm wondering that. Okay, so you are
no,
reading.
Ria is actually a faculty member of our department in Prafulla Chandra College.
I imagine that. So, but I
Yeah.
thought of some other college who
Okay.
have joined on the webinar. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
I see.
Yeah.
So Ria, continue with the questions, please. Hello,
Yes,
Ria.
Ria. Hello. Yes, please.
Madhuja, I think she got disconnected for some reason, because we're having these technical issues and network connectivity issues right from the beginning today. That's very unfortunate, but that is the reality. So I think I would go ahead, if you permit me, to ask the same question that Ria was asking. Can I
Yes,
go ahead?
please. Yes, yeah.
Okay. So the question was from Orunima Shen, and she's asking, do you think that the vocabulary of these movies influence the contemporary socio-political rhetoric emerging around us during this pandemic in terms of political speech and social media messages?
I think that's yeah.
There is a related question from Dr. Shourav Banerjee too, I think.
But if I would just answer this question,
Yes, sure. Please.
I think I actually I was exactly saying this thing. So it's I have already I suppose I've spoken about that, as to how cinematic narrative, not a plot, but a narrative structure, a pattern of storytelling, is influencing various kind of social media products and creations, as well as particularly political narratives.
So I think there is just time enough for one more question from Dr. Shourav Banerjee. And his question is, what is your take on the government's narrative, like suppressing facts and shifting blames and passing the buck, etc.? And then the rest of I think what he means is the government's role in playing
I
up
can
their
see
success.
success.
Yeah, right.
I'm not sure which government you are talking about, but I don't. I don't think my political view was so opaque. I think it was quite transparent as to what I was, what my political views are.
Yeah, that's a very candid answer anyway. But I think Shourav also got his answer. I also don't see any more questions in the comment box. So I think we may end with this,
Yes.
I guess.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madhuja, and I'm very sorry because there has been this, seeming lack of coordination among the faculty members of the department, which is not exactly the case. For example, Ongshuman was supposed to come on screen right now and, sort of make an announcement of some kind, but I don't see him in the room at all.
I'm
So I
very
don't know.
much.
Okay.
I'm
So
there.
Ongshuman, okay.
Can you see
So
me?
no, I
No.
can't, which is why I want you
Um,
to be visible. So could you? Yes, now you are
oh,
visible.
yes.
Yes, yes.
So now I'm live, and as all of you can see that I'm out in the open on my terrace because my internet connection is playing hide and seek once again. Modhu Jadi, it was a wonderful presentation, a very insightful one at that, but at the same time, I'm very sorry to announce to my audience that the second lecture that was to be delivered by Dr. Shudev Pratim Basu is I mean, it has to be deferred because of some technical glitches. As you can understand, that we could not really hold it today. And as you can see, even from Madhujadi's paper, that the audio could not be embedded duly, so that some of the clips that she was trying to show could not be shown because of those glitches. And the same problem has arisen in case of Dr. Basu's presentation, and he was supposed to talk on rock music. As you can understand, the entire thrust was on music. So unfortunately, the presentation cannot be delivered today. It cannot be it cannot be presented today. So we are very sorry to say that we are deferring it, and it is rescheduled on kindly note. It is rescheduled on 8th, that is on Wednesday at 11 in the morning. 8th, that is on Wednesday, coming Wednesday, 11 in the morning. We are hoping to, send you one formal mail as well indicating this, but please bear with this. Be with us on that day as well. Unfortunately, yesterday we were very happy and that there were no technical glitches. I see there is no point of being proud, or there is no scope for nurturing any hubris after all, and it has played foul today. We are very sorry to say that we are not going to have the second lecture today. And since it's not a proper valediction, we are also keeping the valedictory session for for the next day, that is after Shudevda's lecture. We will actually go for the valedictory session. He will be duly informed through the email. So it's
with separate link.
the end
With
for
separate
today.
link.
Or with a separate YouTube link, obviously it will be sent to you via your
It has
email.
to be rescheduled.
Right. So
I
There
just
is
wanted
one
to
more.
thank you very much. Before you sum it up officially, Anuradha, Anshuman, and Shudeep also is there, and Arlene also, if she is there. It is really, really very nice to be in touch virtually, and hope sometime in the future we sit down, um, you know,
yeah,
holding hands
for
as
sure.
in
Yeah.
Contagion.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let us keep
Oh,
hoping.
Shudevda is also here. So can we hear a couple of sentences from Shudevda promising us
His mic
that
is
presentation,
his mic
that
is
presentation on Wednesday?
Yes,
Shudevda,
Right.
yes.
please.
If only I could sing, then I wouldn't have had recourse to the audio. But as you can find out, you're a bad singer. So yes, because my entire thrust of the presentation would have been music, and it's unfair to sort of have the same kind of lyrics for Led Zeppelin on one hand and Cannibal Corpse on the other. So you need to listen to the Cannibal Corpse as well as Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and the rest. So I suggest that we hang on till Wednesday for a complete presentation where you get to listen to the music, because that is what I will be talking about, how music is intervening, incorporating pandemics, plagues, apocalyptic visions. So yes, thank you for the opportunity, though I couldn't be part of the presentation, but I enjoyed every minute of Modhuja's lectures and the
and
videos.
Just to button, thank you. Please convey my love and regards to my friends and your colleagues and friends in Shantiniketan.
We'll do so. We'll do so. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So thank you. So it's we call it a day for today. So
Yes.
we are meeting again on Wednesday in the morning
There
at
is
11.
there is one more point to make, Angshuman, and that is
Yes.
many of our audience members are asking about the feedback form. So
It will be available only after the last speech, that is after
yes. So
Sudhir's
please
speech,
make
because I had a talk with our technical support, Dr. Abul Salam. He has said that the feedback form will go live only after Professor Dr. Sudhir Pratimbasu's lecture on Wednesday. So please wait till Wednesday and listen to it, and after that you provide your valuable feedback. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Yes, Madhuja, Aline, and Dr. Shudev Pratimbasu, all three of you. It's a very unfortunate instance, of course. It makes us very sad, but at the same time, we are just keeping our hopes alive for Shudevda's lecture on Wednesday at 11 a.m. sharp. So let's meet on that day at 11, and let's call it a day
Yes.
today. Okay.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you.